Joining us now, please welcome Brant DeBow.
We are on the cusp of a time of unparalleled change, where products will stop being made for all of us and start being made for each of us. Each and every one of you are going to be purchasing products that are tailor-made to you, that fit you, that have your wants and your needs in mind when they're created. But with that gigantic leap forward, there's also risk. What is that risk? We're going to address that in a second. But first of all, I want to talk to you about the forces that are driving what I think is the golden age of great products. The internet. We're all pretty convinced that we understand the internet, right? And it's kind of in this stasis point now. First there was the dot-com irrational exuberance, followed by the bust, and settled into what Jim Cramer has dubbed the FANG companies: Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google. So we search for our stuff on Google, we buy everything on Amazon, we stare at Facebook all day, and we binge watch Netflix all night. And that's the internet, right? We're kind of done here. But as is our charter today, I want us to think again. I want us to ask real questions about those four companies especially, but also why? What made those four companies powerful? And can we use that to predict what's next? What is coming down from the internet? What is it changing? And that's because it's my belief that the internet has fundamentally changed the basis of competition. And not only that, but it is fundamentally changing the basis of competition, moving the goalposts, rearranging different industries, reintegrating and disintegrating different things that came before it. So let's take a look at where we came from, the industrial economy. And the industrial economy was really built on two things: scale and distribution. And they were kind of fit together, right? Distribution was the absolute hardest problem of the industrial economy. You had to get stuff made, and you had to get it to people. And that was really, really hard. Not only that, but you had to get enough people, that scale, to justify the fixed costs. So newspapers are a great example. And newspapers are one of those great canary in the coal mine companies, right? Newspapers have felt most dramatically the shift that the internet has brought. So they had a printing press. It's a massive fixed cost. It's something they had to spend a lot of money on. They had to build a network, and that gave them essentially a geographic monopoly, right? In a city, you could count on no one else is going to be able to spend this amount of money and put together this network to be able to deliver the newspaper. But they also needed scale. So they bundled together lots of different things. If you were interested in the current news, but you didn't care about sports, you just took the news section out. If you did care about sports, you grabbed that one, or maybe you just read the funny pages. We bundled all those things together so that we could appeal to 80%. And 80% was sort of the magic number of the industrial economy. You wanted to just make things that were palatable. Not necessarily great, not necessarily things that people love, but a lot of things that people wouldn't turn away from. And that's why it looked like this, right? You have producers on one side, consumers on the other side, but the big problem in the middle, the big one that's being solved is distribution. And that makes a lot of these companies set up with that big assumption, that they have to be huge to solve that problem. And so what it led to is brands were built on a promise to not be bad. They were interested in scale. You wanted to get something that was 80% that most people could work with. Maybe they don't love it, but at least they can buy it and it'll stay there. This last weekend, I made cinnamon rolls at home from scratch with my kids. And if you've ever had homemade cinnamon rolls and you've eaten Pillsbury cinnamon rolls, you can tell those are two different things, right? They have two different goals in mind. But it's not that the Pillsbury cinnamon rolls are terrible. If you make them, I'll eat them, I promise. I might be like, oh, this is so bad. I wish these were homemade. Have some more. But they are a promise to not be bad. They will be the same in every store. They'll be consistent. They won't be rancid or terrible. They'll just be not bad. And that's what brands were really built on. So, quick example, McDonald's, right? A lot of people, when we talk to companies about jobs to be done, and we talk to them about this, we ask them, what's the jobs to be done? Why do you hire McDonald's? And everybody says, well, I'm hungry. Right? But the real reason why you hire McDonald's is that it's consistent, it's convenient, it's always the same, it's affordable. Those are so many other things that it does. In fact, Ray Kroc once quipped that he's not in the food industry, he's in the real estate business. Because the McDonald's is always on the right-hand side of the road when you're driving home. It's easy to go off there. It's the big beacon saying, just don't cook dinner tonight, come on. Another thing is Starbucks is a great example. I am a huge coffee snob, but just a little secret, don't tell anybody, I drink a lot of Starbucks. So, but just keep that on the down low. Why? Because Starbucks is a pretty good cup of coffee. It's not the best, it's not the absolute best coffee I could make or the best one I could get, but it'll do the job, and it'll be consistent. It'll be pretty much the same thing I ordered. So the internet changes this in a fundamental way, because what it does is it puts a zero in this equation. Distribution is now not the biggest problem, right? Distribution, connecting a producer to a consumer, is actually a fairly easy problem for the internet. And so when one piece of that chain becomes modularized, new things can be reintegrated. So what happens when you take producers and consumers, and you can connect them together? And that's what I think is really driving this amazing development of new products. And it also brings about another phenomenon for those companies that were built on industrial assumptions. It's what I call from Moat to Noose. Those big, huge fixed costs, those big investments, the way you set up your whole company, everything that was built on that industrial assumption, the thing that pushed everybody away and kept all the other businesses from stealing anything from you and taking any profit, that was your moat. But it's starting to constrict you. Those big fixed costs, those huge companies, those developments like that, those are taking you away from serving the customers that want something much more tailored. And it also gives us what we call the smiling curve, because it looks like a big smile. So you have producers on the left and consumers on the right. On the internet, the rule is the value goes to whoever owns the relationship with the customer. And you can see that right here. Who owns the left hand? Those who have a deep relationship with the customer. So individual writers, perhaps, also YouTube stars, or Taylor Swift, Beyonce, Adele. Why couldn't they take their music off the streaming networks and sell it direct? Because it doesn't matter that everybody likes their music. It matters that the people who do like their music have an intensely deep connection. And so they own that side of the smiling curve. Over on the other side are the brands that are aggregating all these consumers. They don't have a deep connection. They have an extremely broad connection. So you have Facebook, it's a great example, Google. We don't go to Google to see what the doodle is up at the top today, right? And we don't go to Facebook because we like that blue color. We go to these things because we want an answer, and we're convinced that Google will give it to us, or we're going to just waste some time and look at Facebook. So those two connections with the consumer really drive the two pieces of value. Down at the bottom, moving bits around on the internet, not a very interesting part of the curve. So what does this mean for products? Well, I'll take one quick example. From my own area of expertise, I run a company. We help brands and startups with their mobile app strategy and development. So my entire business is actually made possible by the iPhone. But it's a great example of a product that sits in between these two eras, right? It is clearly an industrial product. They make 250 million of these a year. It's an intensely complicated supply chain. They're all phenomenally identical, and that's an amazing industrial accomplishment. But what else is the iPhone? The central conceit of the iPhone is it's a sheet of glass that becomes what you want it to be. So when you take out your phone and you put your apps on it, you make it your phone. And that's why it has that deep emotional connection. That's why Apple reaps 90 to 95% of the profit, even though they don't make all the phones. And if you don't believe me, switch phones with the person next to you and see how long you can make it on someone else's phone. And it's, ooh, like they set this up all wrong. It's a terrible phone. So another great example is a company called Bevel. And Bevel makes shaving products for African American men. So they've thrown out the idea of an 80% solution. This is a demographic that would have been sadly overlooked by some of these big brands that have to have scale and distribution. Bevel instead says, no, I want to make a product that people love. A product made for them to be just excited and happy about. And that's the kind of products that we're talking about here. That's the kind of things that the internet is enabling. So what's next? Well, anytime you start to talk about what's next, you get into the dangerous part of the presentation. And just to illustrate why, here's advice from 1998. Don't get in strangers' cars. Don't meet people from the internet. Literally summon people from the internet so you can get in their car. And while I would love to take credit for that, that's actually Carol Nichols on Twitter who originally phrased that. But it's just so perfect, right? Because this is not even 20 years. And we're looking at it and we're saying, how can we possibly be here? It makes no sense. But it makes complete sense when you look at it from the time we're in. So any talk of what's next we have to think about. But I really do think that now the time is right for products that can target small segments, that can truly be great, that can push aside those industrial concerns and make great things for you, and you, and you, each one of us. But there's also danger, and it's something I want to talk about as well. As we're making these things, as we're making the best products we've ever seen, how do we keep buying those products if 25 to 50% unemployment happens? Right? These companies that are toppling these industrial giants that were filled with a bunch of safe bets are very small, orders of magnitude smaller. And so much of the industrial economy was built on massive scale, and scale in employees as well. And now we're scaling that back. We have to make sure that this dislocation takes care of everyone. That this is not something that we end up causing a massive dislocation. And the Industrial Revolution itself caused a rather massive dislocation. So it is definitely something that is a danger to think about. But I also think about this in terms of my kids. What do I tell them when there's no safe bets? The industrial economy had a lot of safe bets, pension plans, and big companies that you had a secure job in. Now, I think the future is actually a very good one, but we have to be mindful of making sure it is a good one. And lastly, when it comes to monopolies and antitrust, the way that we've dealt with these companies in the past is we've looked at someone who takes control of supply. I own all the railroads. I own all the steel. And what happens? I raise prices. So all of our antitrust thinking has been built on prices go up, you have a monopoly. But the internet companies, Facebook, Amazon, Google, these are companies people love. They're not companies they have to work with because they work on controlling demand. And the best price for that is zero, right? We don't pay Google, we don't pay Facebook. The best price is zero. So how will we wrestle those in a framework? And Ben Thompson of Stratechery has been doing really great work on this, and I owe actually a ton of this thinking to him as well. But it's something that we have to wrestle with. And I hope we do, because as I said, I'm very optimistic for the future. I think it is a bright one. But it's up to us. It's up to business leaders, a society, a community, to make sure that it's a great future. Not for each of us, but for all of us. Thank you.